We are in Siman Pei Daled, the end of the Ramah of Halacha Hey. So the beginning of the Shulchan Aruch have been talking about, and also the Ramah we're talking about, that a person found flour that had bugs in it. Okay, that's what they have been talking about, and we talked about last time what would be usher about if the bugs were in the flour. Why should bugs in flour be usher? That's what we talked about. But they're usher. Okay. Now the Ramah says, for usher, the Ramah says, now that you have this flour that has bugs in it, you're now allowed to sell it to a guy. Maybe the guy will go and sell it to another yid. You happen to have noticed that there were bugs in it. The other yid's not going to have any reason to think that his flour has any bugs in it. He's going to buy it and going to use it. So by you taking it and selling it to a guy, you have 1,000 pounds of flour now. What are you going to do with this stuff? So you say, I'll sell it to a guy. If you sell it to the guy, he might sell that out to a yid, and the yid won't have any reason to suspect there are bugs in it, and the Mela, you're being machshel, or you're putting up a Takalah, that yid might end up.
There's no fit to check the flour.
So of course, assuming that that's right, there's no reason to check flour. We'll maybe get to that in a second. But yes, he's assuming the yid would not check it. He has no reason to check it. Yeah. If you happen to have noticed the batches, remember, until we get to Halachos, we're only talking about things that we know have bugs in them. Only Halachos is when we start being chayshish for bugs. Okay, till Halachos means things that we know the bug is there. So you open the bag, there was bugs all over the place. So you're not going to eat it. You want to sell it to the guy. Seems like the best thing to do with it. So he says, no, you're not allowed to do that because you're chayshish that you might. That he might sell it to a yid, and that it will be a Takalah for you.
You have the same why the Takalah?
We're getting to that. Very good, Yankee.
Why the Takalah?
Because the yid is going to eat.
He's not the Becheskas on head, right? So what's the answer?
Okay, so it's a very good question. I didn't think of that question. So David says this. He says, what's the problem? The yid who's eating it is allowed to do it. Because he's not mechuyev to, because flour in that place is not infested. He's not mechuyev to. Okay, so is he doing this or is he not doing this? He's not doing anything isser but kavana, but he's doing it shleim.
He's eating becheskas, right? I go buy flour, mutar buy flour, mutar do it. I don't have to check it. I don't have to check it, right? So anytime good, right? Anytime I buy flour, I don't have to check it, right? But now that I happen to know.
But is he eating bugs?
Now this has bugs.
He's eating bugs or he's not eating bugs?
So he's eating bugs. Anytime it's becheska, I'm not mechuyev to check it. I happen to have bugs. Am I ever anything? Yeah.
B'shoigin.
If a becheskas is allowed to eat it, right? Right? Anytime you eat eggs. Many times you eat eggs from treifas, for sure.
That's true.
Right? Will you ever anything? No,
it's a good question. Okay, it's a good question.
It's not local. You know what? It's not the guys in a few places in Shas.
I know that. No,
and every single one of those places, you got to say he's going to eat the check.
Okay, right. So I'm answering a question. Another question.
It's a good question.
What happens if you have the same food, two people? One person has good eyesight, and the other one doesn't have good eyesight. So one can't see the bugs, and one could see.
Right. So one has average, and the other one has less than average or over average.
That's not good.
The other one has less than or over average.
So one has over average.
Over average, and therefore what? So the guy sees over average. So we'll see.
Eating bugs.
So we'll see when we get to it. Don't worry about the guy over average. The guy with over average doesn't make a difference. We'll get to him.
It's a general question. Maybe it's Tintum Malay. That's a shayla. Tintum Malay is this kind of things.
Okay. It's a good question. Okay, it's a good. I'll have to think about that. I know when people talked about that. Okay, I'll think about that. It's a very good question. I'm not sure. Okay, so like Yossi said, which is where I was headed, was that this is our more here in Halachos Taloim. It comes from at least one of the mutar is a Gemara in Masechet Pesachim that if you have a boat full of wheat that sank, okay, they get dunked into the water, so those wheat kernels became chametz. So the din is, you're not allowed to sell, the Gemara says, you're not allowed to sell the wheat to a guy, because a yid who will buy them, unsuspecting, will use them on Pesach. Okay, he'll buy the wheat kernels. Wheat kernels are assumed to not, at least in those days, wheat kernels are not assumed to be chametz. He'll buy the wheat kernels and make matzah out of it, and make whatever he wants.
Does it make a difference of what time of the year it was, or does it make a difference?
What's the difference?
Is it, let's say it was after Pesach. Let's say it happened.
I mean, he's going to use it up by next Pesach.
Is it Talmud? Does it make a shuluk?
No, the Gemara doesn't say. I don't, wheat kernels are not like that. Wheat kernels last forever.
That question, guy lives in China, right? No Jew's going to buy him, right? Is that such a thing?
We'll get to that. We'll get to that also. Okay, so if such a thing comes from a Gemara, there might be other ayahs. So the Gemara did talk about Klaim. Also, the Gemara says you can't sell it to a guy because the guy might resell it to a yid, and therefore there's a chashash of a Takalah to the yid who's going to buy it. Okay, so now in order to just to understand when we do and don't see this chashash Takalah, okay, we're going to go to. We're not going to physically go, but we're going to have to look in Hilchos Treifas. Okay, that's where the shayla really is in Hilchos Treifas. Okay, the Mechaber says if you have an animal that's a suffix drusa, Okay, it's not important to us what that is, but it's a kind of a suffix trefa. Okay, you have an animal that's a suffix trefa. When it's alive, you already know that there's a suffix about it being a trefa. Usually you don't find out till it's dead. Here you know when it's alive that it might be a trefa. So what's the din? You're not allowed to sell it to a guy because he might resell it to you. Okay, another example of this din. The Ramah says on that two things. Okay, the first thing he says is, if the animal, the thing that's wrong with it is obvious to anybody who looks at it, anybody who looks at this animal will see that it's a suffix juicer, then it's okay to sell it to the guy. Why? Because the yid who buys it is going to also notice that thing. Okay, anybody who's going to shaft an animal knows to look for these things. So if it's obvious, when you look at the thing, it's obvious that that it's a suffix juicer, it's okay to sell to okay to sell to the guy. Now, I'm going to just distract you for a few minutes to something else. Okay, there's a din in Kuf Yud Zayin, in a few simanim, that says that all the different situations in Kuf Yud Zayin is the situations when you are and are not allowed to sell things that are asur ba'achila. Of course, something that's asur ba'ana you can't sell. But there's a special din Rabbanan probably, an isur shchira, you're not allowed to do business with things that are asur ba'achila. Not that are asur ba'ana. Meaning, if you want to open up a supermarket that sells chazer, you're not allowed to. Okay, not because it's asur b'hana. Chazer is not asur b'hana, but there's an isur shchira with machal sasurus. Okay, now, in the case that the Ramah mentioned, of the person who has the suffix juicer, that doesn't apply, because one of the exceptions in that Isser Schleira is if it happens to come to you that you happen to have ended up with the tray food, that you're allowed to. Anybody who owns a Shlachtos does that. You shecht an animal, the animal comes out to be in the Vela, it ends up being a treifa, you're allowed to sell that. There's no Isser Schleira in that food, because it just happened to have come to you, you're allowed to sell. The only Isser Schleira is when you do business in it. You open up a supermarket and the supermarket sells treif. That you're not allowed to do. But if you happen to get one, like in the case in Nun Zayin, in the Shulchan Aruch, they have a suffix juice, so you had an animal, it got a suffix that it became a treifa, so you're allowed to sell.
Hindquarters got to get enough.
Hindquarters, okay, so the hindquarters is a good question. Okay, probably the same thing.
No, that's not.
Same thing.
Quarters, mutar.
That's not.
Okay, that's another reason. Okay, we're going to get to. Okay, Rega. Okay, so now what's more negate does is, what happens if I own a fruit store? Okay, back to Halachos Tolan. I own a fruit store, and I buy vegetables, and they have bugs inside of them. I know they have bugs inside of them. Okay, well, I know that they possibly have bugs inside of them. Is there an Isser Schleira? I'm not talking yet about the Isser Takalah. Takalah we'll get to in a second. Is there an Isser Schleira to sell those vegetables? These are not, they didn't come to me. When I bought the vegetables, they were there. That's my business. I sell, let's say, broccoli. I sell broccoli.
You buy them you buy the fruit, you get the
So, okay, good question. So I'm doing, my business is to sell, let's say, my business is to sell fresh raspberries. They have bugs inside of them. So if I buy them, I'm buying, what? No, I'm not talking about the takal. I'm not talking about that I might cause someone to eat treif. There's an issue to sell treif. Even to goyim now it says. You're not allowed to do business in it. So I'm going to get to takal in a second. I'm going to get to the takal in a second. But is there schleira to sell those vegetables?
You're selling some delicious bugs.
So is that an issue or is it not? Okay, it's a machlokes haposkim. Okay, machlokes haposkim, how you should look at this case. The machlokes is right here in our simon. Okay, the Prichader says it's mutar. He says let's think for a second. The fact, when somebody buys that vegetable from you, does he pay a different price if it has bugs in it? Does he pay more because it has bugs in it? He says, of course not. You don't pay more for the... Yankee says, I knew you'd say that. He said, he doesn't pay more for it. So he says, that shows you that you're not doing the business in the bug, you're selling raspberries. The bugs that are there are not part of the sale. The sale is just on the fruit. The bug is not part of the sale. So he says, you're not doing schleira. The issue is to do schleira with machal says, I'm not doing schleira. I'm just doing, what am I selling? I'm selling fruits. The bugs are like, they come for free. You get them. So I'm not doing schleira. That's what the Prichader says. Prima God also not saying it. He says, what are you talking about? He says, what's the reason why there's an Isser Schleira? Why did Chazal make up such an Isser to sell tray food? Where did they come up with that? So the pshat is, because Chazal were concerned that if you always do business with tray foods, it's your regular part of your business, you might lose yourself and eat one of them. Okay? You might pick up some of the food that you're selling, which is usher to eat. Since you're always trading this thing, you might end up eating it. He says, so, it doesn't make a difference if the sale is on the bug per se or on the carrot. The point is, the food that if you would eat this thing, you might be over Isser. And the Mela, he says, so the Prima God says, of course there's an Isser Schleira to sell vegetables that have bugs in them. Now,
you don't use the words, why did Chazal answer?
Yeah.
It's the right stuff.
It's a question, okay? He's assuming that it's a draban.
Assume it's a draban.
It's a draban. So that's what Prima God says. It's only us because we might be...
Retail level is... Or are you saying on a wholesale?
No, anything. Doesn't make a difference. The person can talk about that, even if it's packaged and canned and like that, then you can't physically eat it, it's also anyhow. Okay, it's also anyhow, even if you can't actually get to the food. But the point is, because you might choose to eat the food. He says, so in Cain, it applies even if you're not technically selling the bug, but you're selling the lettuce, and the lettuce has a bug in it, you might eat it. So now, you should know, the Pri Megadim ends off. He says, Lamaisa is the minig is not like I'm saying. He says, the minig is that people do not consider an Issa Schara, when they say like the Pri Chadar. He says, but I can't figure out why. He says, I don't understand why it's the reason.
They're talking about vegetables that you can't clean, right?
It has nothing to do with that. Again, we're not talking about the chashash Takalah. We're talking about the Isser Schara.
Right now,
if you have a piece of chazer, you're not allowed to sell it. It's not a matter because I might sell to a yid.
So I shouldn't be able to do a business with live behemoths.
Because?
So it's us to eat now. You need a live behemoth.
Okay. So the Halachos Binyamin Kufid Zayin says, he gives two answers. He brings two answers.
It's not part of it. It's different behavior. If you own a behemoth, you know you're going to have to shecht it before you eat it, right?
Yeah, it's just schayra. It's not. So you're.
But no, because you never eat that.
Okay, right. He's saying is that the way the Rebbe said the issue is because you might come to eat it.
You have to clean it. This food is mostly you have to clean it.
And that's what you do with it. It's just like the animal, you shecht it before you eat it. The vegetable, you wash it before you eat it also.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the same. I don't think could a person pick up a carrot and eat it? Of course he could eat it. Just like he could eat a piece of chazer. He could pick it up and eat it. But the behemoth, you can't eat it. We could take a bite out of the live animal. What
okay,
do?
That's not true. I can't deal with pigs. I can't deal with pigs.
Okay.
That's a difference.
Now, I got to kill it before I eat it.
That's the difference. That's the difference. That's the difference with the Chashmonaim.
Halachos Binyamin has two truths.
No, Chazer is the bazooka.
This is chayyur also.
Also the Gada.
But there's no Issa chayyur.
That's chayyur, but the Gada.
That's what you're doing.
The Gada is mutar.
I don't remember. I think it's because it's not considered food.
And you're joint.
That's not considered food.
Okay.
I'm talking about in America.
No, that's everywhere. Also, got a Chazer sauce everywhere. No.
Okay. Back. The Halachos Binyamin in Kufid Zayin. In Kufid Zayin brings two answers to the question. One is, I think, his own. Well, one is his own based on the dig of the Pri Chadar. He wants to say that's what the Pri Chadar meant. And one is he brings from other people. The first answer is, he said is, the Isser that we say don't have, there's an Isser Schayra because you might eat it, is only when the food is irrevocably Asr. It's a food that there's no hope for it. Okay? It's a food that no matter what, a nevela can't be made kosher. Can't make it kosher. He says, but if you have a food that has a way to be made kosher, it's just a matter of right now you can't eat it, like something that has bugs in it. Okay? Then he says that then the issue doesn't apply to it. He wants to be back that in the Pri Chadar.
About something that's should really, like,
that what?
Get the bugs out.
So then you might be right. Okay, so maybe you wouldn't be allowed to sell that. That's a good point. It's a good question. In certain foods, maybe. That's a good point. Now, he brings another example, which is salty meat. I don't get that example. Maybe I just don't understand it well enough. He's talking about whether, he says salty meat is another example of it, and it is a very good illustration, which is
salty meat?
Meat that is not yet salted. Meat that is not, that's not yet salted. So he says that's an example of a food that's not the etzem usher, it's usher temporarily. There's a way to fix it. I didn't get it because right. That's what I didn't get is that really it's really mutar to eat it right now. You don't have to take the salt out. You don't have to take the blood out. It's only usher if it was pure. Okay, so but it was a good example. It's a good example of a food. It's a good example.
The only way to make it right is
so you can burn it.
But you could eat.
You have to let the customer.
Well, yeah, I still can go ahead and eat it raw.
And his other territories. He's another answer.
What? Not clear. I'm sorry, we're going to come and eat it.
That might be raw.
Yeah, nobody eats it all.
Okay. The last, his other answer is that it can sign that this is considered this dominantly other. Okay, he brings some people who say it's considered that even though your business is buying and selling broccoli, every bug that's in there is like it came there by mistake, like you unexpectedly it came into there. Okay, you could look at every one of them as like that. It's like it's like finding the nevela when you shut animals. Just a nevela, if it's in this dominantly other, it happens to be you're allowed to do this. There's no issa schar. Maybe over here it's not issa schar because it's like it happened. Just like I'm not sure how clear that is because I mean.
It was there before you bought it.
No, it's not that it's there before. It's part of the business. It's when you buy a case of lettuce, it comes with bugs. It's part of the business. It's not like
you don't want it there.
Right, okay, so
there's probably a certain percentage that's clean.
Right, okay, so that's what the Nizam is. Okay, now, Kenzain, that all this thing that I'm telling you about this is Chara, Kenzain is not going to get to us. Why? Because let's say you'll say, like Pri Megadim, who wants to admit that there isn't Issa Chara to sell vegetables that have bugs in them. It says, the Issa Chara, one of the exceptions is that the Issa Chara only applies to things that are Asr Midaraisa. Things that are Asr Midarabanan, there's no Issa Chara on them. So, that's why one of our friends, a from person, sells straight cheese. He's allowed to sell treif cheese because treif cheese is only asur midrabanan. So there's no issur schar on yishur midrabanan. It's only on yishur midaraisa.
So why by Pasakum I can't give it to another guy because we're afraid?
Because of Takalah. We'll get into that. Because of Takalah. So he says. So in Cain, we could say let's say it's us, when we're talking about in our din, you're not allowed to, when we were talking in a case like ours, we know that there's a bug inside it, it's asur midaraisa to eat the food. But a person who owns a fruit store, most of the things that he's selling are only asur midrabanan. They have a midrabanan, midrabanan, you have to check it before you eat it. So that person, it's only the bug per se is asur midrabanan. But the schara that I'm doing is in a food that's only asur midrabanan. What would happen if I ate it? I've isur midrabanan. I'm not having checked it. A thing that's only asur to eat midrabanan, it's only asur to bite into that lettuce midrabanan. So maybe we'll say there's no fish. There's no.
But if you know they're bugs,
So I'm not talking about, I'm talking about if you want to open a fruit store, is there an issur schar? According to Prima Gum says he can't open, it would sound like he can't open a fruit store. So I'm saying, no, he didn't mean that. He meant when you have a food that you know has bugs in it, then that's where the machlokes is. But if you just have a head of lettuce, what it's going to mean is that now if you want to open the fruit store, the David Cohen fruit store, you have to become a big expert. Foods that are infested with mutar that you can sell. Foods that are muhsik, you wouldn't be allowed to sell.
Like broccoli.
Broccoli's not muhsik. Let's say you have things that are muhsik. Let's say, I'm going to tell you one, you're going to be surprised. Let's say celery. Okay, celery's got loads of bugs in it, but it's just easy to clean. We don't think of it as a problem because it's easy to clean. But is it muhsik b'talon? Right now, does it have? Sure, celery's got bugs. Every head of celery's got bugs in it. They're all full of it. So that's the thing. So here's the guy trying to open a fruit store. He says, broccoli, I can sell. Because that's only me and Amatzi. Lettuce, I can sell. Celery, I can't sell. Okay, so all of a sudden this guy's having such a land that here he thought he's going to take a simple job. He's going to just open a fruit store. He's open a fruit store, so it's going to come, if you hold like the Prima Gum, he's going to have an issur schara to be doing business and he can't sell celery. It sounds like, I told you that the Prima Gum says that there's many, it's not like that. The Kodesh argues and others argue, so whatever the thing is, but anyhow, that's the question of issur schara.
Will this be the same thing if I'm wrong? Just tell me is. Let's say I want to go into the poultry business. I want to sell poultry. I hold inchkin to I don't want to be past inchkin to minuter. But it would be mutar to do it.
Okay, next. Okay, go back to the Ramah. The first thing the Ramah said was. The first thing the Ramah said was that if it's obvious.
That's what he held.
The first thing the Ramah said was that if it's obvious that the thing is a suffix Jew, so you're allowed to sell.
Right.
The second thing the Ramah says is that if it's a suffix, it's not Nikitas and Travis. If there's the suffix that there is to this animal is a kind that I hold is asur, but other people hold is mutar, then there's no chash takalah for that thing. I hold it's asur. I can't eat this animal because by me, this suffix drusa is a suffix that I'm not allowed to eat, but there are other people who hold that it's mutar, then I can sell it to a guy. Why can I sell it to the guy? Because I sell it to the guy. So what if I sell it to a yid? What's going to happen? Even if he sells it to the yid, there are those hold it's mutar anyhow.
Like raisins.
Like raisins. Okay, I'm not sure what your example is, but I can sell it to other people because what's going to happen if I sell it to him? If he sells it to a yid, what's going to happen? So I'll sell it to a yid. So for that yid, it might be mutar anyhow. So the Ramah says so it's mutar. Okay, so there's a long shach there. The shach over here brings parts of it. It's in different places that the shach talks about, but there's the long shach that's over there in Nun side. And he tries to say, what is the Ramah talking about? What does he mean to say?
I know what he means.
What do you think?
He also offered the rights of the cool, so it's only the Rabbanan.
Okay, well, you're way ahead of us, okay? Wait, the shach has a simpler way to say it. His first half of me is much simpler than you. His first says, maybe it's a svek. Suffolk if he's going to sell it to a yid. Right, I'm selling it to a guy. Suffolk if he's going to sell it to a yid. Even if he sells it to a yid, maybe the din is that it's mutar. Then he says, maybe maybe the other stuff, maybe you could do this. He brings other cases. Maybe if it's a suffix drabanan, maybe there's no issur schara when it's a suffix drabanan. There's no chash takol when it's issur drabanan. Since it's only a drabanan, maybe he'll sell it to a yid. So if the issur is only an issur drabanan, then it should be mutar. In other words, this would be the, so to speak, regular rules we would say. The chash, I'm selling to the guy who might sell it to the yid. No, it's only a suffix of sell to the yid. So it's a suffix drabanan l'kul. That's the shach declares that maybe these should be things, but he says it's not true. He says if you go look, you look, and what Yankee mentioned before, we had in Hilchos Pasakum, the din is if you have Pasakum, mamish, real good old fashioned, not paspat, good old fashioned Pasakum, the din is you're not allowed to sell those loaves of bread to a guy. Because, the Ramah brought there, because he might sell the Mechaber, I think, over there, because he might sell to a Yid. You're not allowed to sell him a whole loaf, because a Yid will think that a loaf of bread is kosher. No, in those days, there was no reason to think it was treif. It was really pasakum. What's pasakum? Pasakum was only Lesson D'Rabbanan.
Yeah.
It's only Lesson D'Rabbanan. But
it's only Mishum...
No, and it's now we're talking about the Takalah. You might mislead him into eating.
This guy sells pasty throw.
Wait a second. You might mislead the Yid into eating it. So if I sell, they're going to do two isurim. One is the isur schar. You're just not allowed to do business. That doesn't apply here because it's only Lesson D'Rabbanan. There's a different question. If I sell something to a guy who might sell it to a Yid, the Yid will think it's kosher and eat it, and I know that it's treif.
Because you bought it from the other Yid?
No, not because he bought it from the Yid.
Why is it any different?
He's selling you pasty throw.
No, because you've had to buy bread from a guy. Because pas is mutar. I happen to know that. I know that this bread is awesome. I know it's real pas akum. It's not pas paper. So I would sell it to the guy, thinking, what am I going to do with this stuff? So I imagine if in one of our bakeries, by mistake, they made the food was pas akum. It wasn't pas paper. It would be real pas akum. So what would they do? They'd have 100 loaves of bread. So they say, you can't sell it to a guy. He might sell it to a Yid. And nowadays it wouldn't happen because we wouldn't buy bread from a guy. You wouldn't walk into Tony's bakery. But in those days you would. So you're not allowed to do it because, so that's it's a D'Rabbanan. It's an Isser. That's just an Isser D'Rabbanan. There's another case. The Ramah says in Kof Lamed Daled. The Ramah says that what happens if you had stam yain got mixed into another liquid and it wasn't bottled? So it's awesome. You're not allowed to eat it. The Ramah says you're not allowed to sell it to a guy for the same reason. If you sell it to the guy, he'll sell it to a Yid. The Yid will think it's just a plain old drink. It's apple juice, let's say. He'll think that it's a plain drink. He said you won't be allowed to. He'll be over and eat the food. So the Shach says, you see, that even by Yisur D'Rabbanan, and by Pasakim, it's even an Isur D'Rabbanan, it's a really low-level Isur D'Rabbanan, we still are Choshesh for this thing. Don't sell treif things to people because the guy might be sold to a Yid, even though the Isur is very small, and even though the regular rules of Safek D'Rabbanan, the Kula, Svek Seika would have told us you could be Meko. So, to go to the Takalah. So, the Shach says, so what's the Ramah say? The Ramah said by Treifa, if there are those who hold its mutar, you're allowed to sell it. So what's going on? So the Shach says, really the din is, there's a chashash Takalah in every case. Even if it's an Isser D'Rabbanan, even if there's a Svek Seika, you have to chashash. Chazal chose to be machmir for the chashash Takalah anyhow. But, in a case where there are many tzdadim l'hakel, okay, which he says in Safek Drusa, I don't know enough about it, by Safek Drusa there's many tzdadim to be mekel, that's one thing. Or, in a case where min hadin, the ikar hadin is that it's really mutar, and you're just being machmir. Not that it's a machloikas hapoiskim. Some say yes, some say no. Really, the din is that it's mutar, and you're just choosing to be machmir. In those cases, that's when the Ramah meant that you don't have to be choshev for Takalah. But in any case where there's a legitimate tzafik, and it's not obvious that it's mutar or not many tzaddim l'hakel, then you're not allowed to sell. Okay, so what's wrong? What was wrong with the Shach thought originally? The Shach seemed to have been right. We should say Svek Seika, we should say Safek D'Rabbanan the Kula. What was wrong with that? Okay, so the Pri Megadim there and here and in a few places says the same thing, and he seems to be trying to answer this question because what he says is not what the Shach says. So he seems to be trying to answer this question. What was wrong with Safek D'Rabbanan the Kula? What was wrong with Svek Seika? The Pri Megadim says that when you sell the food to a guy, what you're doing is you're creating a Svek Seika. And it's also to put yourself into a situation where something is mutar because of Svek Seika. If you have a Svek Seika, it happened, you have the thing and it's a Svek Seika, that's okay. It's mutar. But to say, I have a loaf of bread now, the loaf of bread is treif, and I'm going to sell it to the guy because then it will be a Svek Seika. Maybe he'll sell it to a Yid and I'm sorry, they're talking to our cooler. But these kind of things, when you put yourself into that situation, he says that you're not allowed to do. That's the Pri Megadim says. Okay? Now, we're gonna not talk about that now. Okay? What the rule for that is? No. It may be an Halachos, maybe not Yadal, or maybe never. We make this. That's quite a deal. Why can't you make a Svek Seika be time? What's wrong with this? What's wrong with putting yourself into a situation where it's mutar? Okay, we'll talk about that when we get there. Okay, but it seems like so now we have to just finish the words of the Pri Megadim. The Pri Megadim doesn't end the sentence, but we're going to end the sentence for him. Okay, Pri Megadim said, you're not allowed to create a Svek Seika. You're not allowed to get yourself into that kind of a situation. Except, what did the Shach say? Except, if the thing is really mutar, or if there are really many tzaddim l'hakel, then you're allowed to put yourself in that situation. Okay, that would be the ending of this Pri Megadim. He doesn't say that, but that's what he means. When the Shach is machmir in the regular cases, but in the case with his it's really mutar, or it's a bunch of tzaddim l'hakel, you can make. Okay, now back to where we were. Okay, so now we talked about these rules from the Shach that when you're choshesh for Takalah now. Okay, so I have a bunch of situations here, scenarios now, for you to don on now that you've heard the shach. A company, a guy owns a company, and by mistake, they made food that was treif, and they labeled it as kosher. Okay, or it was milchuk, and they labeled it as parv. Okay, are you allowed to let this company take this product and go sell it in South Dakota? Okay, there aren't many Jews in South Dakota. So should you say, you know what? Send it to South Dakota, and in South Dakota, aside from their owners, send it to South Dakota, and in South Dakota, chances are no Yid's going to come to buy it anyhow. Who's going to buy it anyhow?
I got to tell you,
Exactly.
I found one of the flea markets up in Pennsylvania. No Jews there. Once went to,
Okay.
So he once went to one of these like dollar store, where sellouts, and he sees a Hampshire brand of pretzels there. So he buys it. He says, funny, cases and cases for 50 cents. So he called them up. He says, what happened? He says, they told him, it said Pas Yisrael. The mashgiach didn't get there on time, and they produced it. So they were supposed to destroy it. But they ended up, they said, we're just going to sell it out in Yehovahsville, and no one's going to see it.
Okay, so now, but let's think, so you're saying is, but wait a second, Yankee, wait a second. So let's think about this a second. We should say is, if I'm selling it in South Dakota, it's only a small suffix that the Yid's going to buy it. So I should say is, let's say it's only Nisud Rabbanan. It's only Nisud Rabbanan, maybe I should sell it. So the Shach said, you can't do that. You can't put yourself into a situation where you're creating this suffix Rabbanan because of the Chashash Takalah. Well, but the other side is that the Supreme Government said you're only not allowed to do that because you're not allowed to create it l'chatchila. So is that l'chatchila? Your case was a Hamish company. It's a Goyish company. The guy's got it. The guy has the stuff. So it's saying to him throw in the garbage. Is that doing it l'chatchila?
I'm going to do like I'm not doing anything.
Tell the guy you got
the guy says, okay, I have all these cases. What am I supposed to do with this stuff?
It has the CRC on it?
Yeah. It has Ashkoch on it. Yes.
I'm not selling it. The cloud. But I'm not the one who owns it, selling it to me. That's the issue for me to sell it to God because the God.
Well, the issue is the issue is the Chashash Takalah.
But I'm not doing anything.
So you're saying I'm not making the spec shaker. He's making the spec shaker. He's the guy. He can make the spec shaker. He doesn't have to Chashish and not make spec shaker. Well, maybe it's okay. That's one question. Good question. It's a question. I don't know the answer. Okay. What happens? Another thing. I go to the store and I buy something, and it has a kosher symbol on it. Okay, and I call up and I find out it's a mistake. It's not supposed to have the symbol on it. Okay.
Corrective action.
Okay. Can I take it back to the store? Or is that a Takalah? Because what are they going to do with it? They're going to sell it to the next Yid. They're going to sell it to, it's a suffix. They may or may not sell it to a Yid. They may sell it to a guy, they may sell it to a Yid. If they sell it to a Yid, the Yid's going to think it's kosher. So if I give it back to him, well, is that making a svek shaker? Or am I going to make a svek shaker? I got bought by mistake. Maybe that's not making a svek shaker. Maybe that's not making a svek shaker because I got it by mistake. I ended up with it. Okay.
Well, why is it creating a svek shaker?
Well, in other words, here it's not svek shaker. Here it's creating a suffix rabbanon l'kula. Okay, the Shach put these cases together.
This label thing is what treif.
The treif.
So why is this not?
In that case, you're right. If it would be vadei aser, then it would be a problem. Let's say it would be aser midrabanan. Okay, you're right. In the case where it's vadei aser, then I'm not making a svek shaker. It's a suffix deraisa.
If the case is what it's a suffix aser.
Suffix aser, so then it's suffix you can sell to a Yid and suffix of in the first
You
place.
said even by speaking to Rabbanon, how far did the Rabbanon make it?
So the Shach said by Chashash Takalah, they said you're not allowed to put yourself.
Right.
Am I putting myself in the situation, or is it just that I got stuck with it?
Somebody else to put it in.
Right. Okay. Next, we talked about if there's an Isser Schora to sell infested vegetables. Okay, we talked about the Isser is not Isser Schora. Forget it now. Put that aside. But there's an Isser Schora.
It's a hefsed, you should know.
Okay, it's a
If I bought something and I can take it back and what's that? What is a loss for me?
And in the case of the Ramah, I have a suffix Jew. So I have an animal. I own a $500 animal, and it just something happened to it. It became a suffix tray for now. I don't have a loss. If I don't have to, I have loaves of bread. I make 20 loaves of bread. What am I going to do with them? They're going to go in the garbage. I mean, every case is always when we say it's trade and I want to sell it to the guy is to recover what I lost my money.
Why don't you have a problem with Kashrus with the rice? I can have somebody else eat it.
Okay. Kashrus is when you can't take care of it. Kashrus
is for your mother?
Okay, next. What happens? We talked about it's a schora to sell infested vegetables. Okay, now put the issa schora on the side. What about the chashash takalah? Let's say I open up a fruit store and I'm not going to sell celery. I'm going to sell broccoli. But what happens if the yid walks in who's not going to check his vegetables? Am I being machshel that person by putting out vegetables that maybe he'll wash and maybe he won't wash them?
This is a whole different shayla.
What's the difference? It's a drabanan. The food is asking drabanan. A yid might buy it, a yid might not buy it. Even the yid buys it, might wash it, might not. No, but the Takalah, might he go ahead and...
You're a Jewish store owner.
Yes.
It's a whole separate shayla. It's a whole separate shayla.
Yeah, well,
What's the difference?
Holy shaylas.
Why?
This is a shayla you can ask a restaurant guy, Jews come in with they'll make breakfast.
No, wait. No, the Shach said, the Ramah said, if it's a suffix, you're allowed to do it. The Shach said he didn't really mean that. You're not allowed to put someone into a situation of a suffix or from the kula. When I lay out my table full of lettuce, a yid might buy it or a guy might buy it. If a yid buys it, he might wash it, he might not wash it. So from the simple reading of the Ramah, our own idea of what the rules might be is we would have said this, suffix or from the kula, you're allowed to do it. It's only us to be in the first place. Wait a second. It's only us to be Rabbanan. But the Shach says, no, you're not allowed to put yourself in that situation where you're leading the person to be over an Issa Rabbanan. So is that what's going on here? People might not be careful. You think it's different? Okay.
So then how do you allow a Hungarian would be able to sell broccoli?
That's the question. Well, that's the question.
If you have a
So maybe a sign takes away the Chashash Takalah. The Ramah said, if everybody knows about it, or it's obvious.
Knows that broccoli is a
Well, if you put a sign on, maybe that's enough.
It's not this, again, this issue of selling something to a guy. There's a special issue of selling to a guy. No, that's a Jew doing business with something because the Jews that buy it are not doing the right things. They're not making brachas. They're not.
That's what you mean. You see, maybe it's different. Maybe it's different. If I sold it to a guy where it's just the yid is going to be totally misled. Okay, he won't know what he's getting at all. But if I'm selling it to the yid, it's sort of you sell it to a yid, he has to understand. It's a matter of like lifnei iver. You know what I mean? And those kind of guitars. So you're saying if it's not lifnei iver, then okay, maybe you're right. Maybe this is not part of that child. Okay, another case. The Pesach Tshuva in Siman Samach Tes says that if a food is going to be mutar b'diavad, then there's no chashash takalah. Okay, food is mutar b'diavad, there's no chashash takalah. Because even if the person eats it, no problem, it'll be mutar b'diavad anyhow. What's he talking about? He's talking about liver that wasn't broiled for 3 days. Okay. The din is that if you don't broil meat, he's talking about meat. If you don't broil meat for 3 days, if you don't kasher meat, if you don't salt meat, if you don't salt meat for 3 days, the din is the only way you can kasher it is by broiling. You can't salt it anymore. After you broil it, you're not allowed to cook that meat anymore. Okay, that's the you're not allowed to cook it. After you broil it, you're not allowed to cook it.
Livers or something.
No, just a piece of chicken. Okay, you didn't catch it for 3 days.
I got it.
You can only broil it. After you broil it, you're not allowed to cook it. But the evidence, if you cooked it, it's kosher. That's the thing. So Zok the Pesach Tshuva, he brings, so I think it's Chamudit. Anyhow, the Pesach Tshuva says that if you held it for more than 3 days, you're allowed to. It's okay. But the evidence, after the person broils it. He's talking about liver, so the person's going to broil it. You know he's going to broil it. Even though it's a possibility he's going to cook it later on. Either he might cook it later on, you're allowed to sell it because b'diavad it's going to be mutar. B'diavad, what will happen if he broils it and then cooks it? B'diavad it's mutar. So the chashash takalah is only when the person, if he does it, will really be over nisser. Here, if the person really does it, it's going to be mutar b'diavad, then it's okay. Okay? That's sort of like what the Shach said, is that if min hadin it's mutar, and you're just being mach, you're not. It's sort of the same thing. Okay, so Schwartz said, if you go into Hungarian, I shouldn't single it out, if you go into one of our stores, and you buy livers, okay, it doesn't say on that sign whether the liver was broiled within 3 days or after 3 days. It doesn't say. Sometimes those livers were broiled after 3 days. Sometimes they sell raw livers that you broil at home, and those are for sure haven't been done in 3 days.
Right.
So there's no sign that tells you if it's done in 3 days or not. And the truth is, no one has a clue. Okay? It's not impossible for anyone there in the store. No one really is keeping track of it and knows of it. So you walk in and buy the livers. So we said, Rabbi Schwartz, should we put up a sign that says these livers are more than 3 days old, less than 3 days old? They were shafted on Tuesday. Should we put in something that lets people know what's going on? I said no. So there's two reasons why. One is because L'chara is because but the evidence is going to be mutar. So the Pesach Tshuva in that kind of cases, no, you don't have to worry about the Takalah. Okay. Now it's not exactly the same case because in this case we're not telling the people the information. In the case of the Pesach Tshuva, the people who were taking care of it knew that it hadn't been done in 3 days. They might forget and do this and that. He says, don't be choishes for that. Okay, our case is a little different because in our case, the person who's buying it mamish has not a clue. There isn't anybody out there who knows what's going on. It's a little bit different in that case. But it's Rabbi Schwartz, and if you go in the store, you'll see that it's not there. Okay, you could argue. You could say, how could we not? At least in the case of the Pesach Tshuva, the guy who did it knew what he was doing. He might forget. So say, okay, don't be so worried about you forgetting because it'll be mutar b'diavad. Okay, in one last case, that was for Yankee, in one last case for David, that the Ramah says that the din is you're allowed to keep truma tmei in your house. Truma tmei you're not allowed to eat, but you are allowed to have hana from it. The Ramah says that you're allowed to keep it in your house. Okay, don't be Kashrus with Takalah. Now, the Taz Shach say, the Gemara says you're not allowed to. The Gemara says that it's also. They say it's okay. That was in those days when people ate truma. They ate truma, so then you're Kashrus. If it's tamei and it's in your house, you might eat it just like you eat other truma. But nowadays, that we don't eat truma even that's tahar, even if we're tahar in it, so we don't eat it anyhow. So, mamela, you don't have to worry about it. No one's going to eat it. So it's no problem keeping it around your house. Okay? And in fact, there's no problem. No chashash takol because you're not going to eat it.
But if you do eat it, then it's a problem, right?
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah,
that's different than the case.
It's a different case. And so, in fact, David did that. Both Davids. Two of the Davids did it. Two of the Davids did it. When David had to be mafresh, a company bought 25,000 pounds of tevel pumpkin seed. Again, David did the hafrasha.
Was that a vare tevel?
As far as we know.
Is it vare?
Depends which David you ask. And we he had to be mafresh about 250 pounds worth of pumpkin seeds. Okay, so those 250 pounds, according to the Din HaGemara, we weren't allowed to keep in our house. You had to get rid of it right away because of a chashash takol. Someone might eat it. The Ramah says, but that nowadays that no one eats truma anyhow, so you're allowed to keep it around until you have a chance to burn it. So David burned it, and now they're in Moshe Kashrus. And these are truma. No, these are truma. These ones that we mafresh is true. And now they're in Moshe Kashrus' garage, and Moshe is going to be burning them.
Burning them.
Well, the Chazon Ish says that if you can't burn it, then there is a Takalah, and you should bury it. That's what we have to do. Didn't really say you have to burn it.
Burn the most, we get a prize.
Right, that's right. So Camp Moshe is going to try to burn it. If they can't burn it, then they're going to bury it with the Sheamus. Sheamus on August 3rd. So if they can't burn it, then they're going to bury it.
Okay.